And then today you came in with what? Just for clarification.
So we shared the Planning Commission's recommendation. That's our standard practice. If the Planning Commission's made a different recommendation, is to bring that forward to you. As they're the recommending body on these land use applications.
My concern still remains that I'm going to want to be more deferential to Aurora in this situation. On the other hand, I'm also concerned about their overall tenor of how we're getting pulled into an issue that Aurora should have been able to handle a long time ago. I have concerns about this and for a couple of reasons. My concern is I want to know at what point will we truly need to give this to Aurora, and at what point will the development really need to handle this? Because we made the decision in Thornton only a few months ago based on that feedback from the developers up there, from the city, and I'm trying to figure out when is it really necessary for us to have this tower either be moved or for Aurora to make that decision. So can you help me understand a little bit more about how we got here? Because it feels like we're being asked to make a decision that really Aurora should be making.
So I'd like to explain the original staff recommendation of 2 years and why we felt that would be adequate. The 2-year timeline will allow some of those negotiations and site selection process to take place. And then the City of Aurora does have a procedure to request and receive extensions in those. And it's our understanding that those could be granted administratively. And so based on learning that and understanding the process for informing Aurora of a new site that had been selected and keeping them informed of progress towards permitting and approving the new site, we felt that that would be adequate to grant an initial term of 2 years by this board and then hand it over to the other parties to determine the appropriate length of additional extensions. So just like our process has a procedure to come back before this board and ask for extensions of conditional use permits, and in other cases we've done terms that we know are shorter than the ultimate need for the use, but there can be periodic updates and progress or reviews of operations to determine if the conditions are operating appropriately. We felt like any extensions would be best reviewed by the City of Aurora. And so that's why we came in with a recommendation of 2 years, knowing that in the chance that it takes longer than that to secure all the approvals for a new site, they would have a path to request and receive extensions.
Do you know why the Planning Commission disagreed with that?
So after the applicant's presentation on July 26th with all the information about the federal regulations and other site selection permitting processes and the anticipated timelines for that, Planning Commission felt that the applicant may need longer than 2 years to secure a new location. In addition to that, with having 2 different carriers and their needs being different on site selections, and then kind of the third layer would be any local jurisdiction permitting. So after the applicant's presentation on all of those different permitting requirements and estimated timelines, they discussed and recommended the 5 years.
Commissioner Hanson.
If the 5-year were to be approved, is there anything that would keep the applicant from negotiating with Aurora Highlands for moving it within that 5-year period anyway and not fulfilling their full CUP?
They could certainly move it earlier. There would be nothing that would require them to stay.
So those negotiations could happen regardless.
Yes.
And so that's really not a unique concern to a 2-year versus a 5-year.
Yes.
Further discussion. Commissioner Odorizio.
I'm still I'm gonna draw the question to the applicant and then the question to the developer. What's the practical effect of this, or is this all about business wrangling and negotiation, and you're asking us to help either side with leverage? I want to know the practical effect of the timeline.
Sure. So the practical effect is, if the CUP runs out, then we have a tower that's non-compliant and potentially has to get taken down. Our concern is we want to be able to pursue the discussions. If we're going to move the tower, let's deal with that and have the time to get the approvals that would be necessary for anything new without having to worry about going back and, having to approve again in a short time with the city, the existing tower. And, what are the issues that might come up there? In fact, we were talking about it, and we would almost need to start applying. I mean, this renewal's been pending a year. So would we need to apply for a renewal from Aurora County, the city of Aurora, almost immediately, right? We don't want to be in that position, because that's just putting our focus away from potentially working out a resolution of the dispute about whether or not, in theory, we have a property right to stay where we are. We're willing to talk to them, and we're hoping to work that out. But in the meantime, 2 years puts us, like I said, almost in a position where we have to almost immediately apply to the city of Aurora just to work through their process to make sure that we're renewing something that at the same time we're talking about. That's our concern. We think that 5 years, to Commissioner Hansen's question, 5 years lets us work something out with them, go through the FCC's process, get historic approval, tribal approval. And I can tell you, this is all, the fact that these things take years is a big issue federally. And people don't like it, and they're trying to figure out a way to deal with it. But the reality is it does. And so we would have to say, here's where we want to be. We're going to go to the FCC. It's going to take, we don't know how many, 2, 3, 4 years. Give us the headroom to get that taken care of without having to go to the city of Aurora every year to get a renewal. Is just inefficient and unrealistic is our concern. Does that answer your question?
For now, I think it states your position. I'd like to understand from the developer what the practical effect is of 2 versus 5 years.
Rita Connerly on behalf of the Aurora Highlands. The practical effect of 2 years versus 5 years is that the cell tower currently resides within development sector number 2, where residential development is planned within that 2 to 5 year time frame. If we prolong and do 5 years, there's nothing that prevents us from immediately commencing negotiations. My fear is, on behalf of Aurora Highlands, is that if there's a 5 year term, we actually start meaningful negotiations in year 3 to get to year 5. And that delay will impact the development and absorption schedule that's currently anticipated for this area.
Any further questions?
I have a question. Could we include a requirement that negotiation, I know this sounds a little weird, and it's the frustration I have is I feel like we're getting pulled into being used as leverage in negotiations between 2 private parties. The public impact here is that we need to have this service continue for the folks that are living and that work in the area. That's what I'm concerned about, is a degradation or negative impact to the service area. But with that said, is there a way to require that negotiations begin and that a plan for transition or next steps be completed within the next 2 years if we were to allow a 3-year or a 4-year permit? Or would that be going a little too far into that?
I think that probably goes beyond our land use authority.
So transition plans and other plans are able to be imposed at this level on other sorts of practical applications, like a plan for landscaping, a plan for other sorts of transitional things. Do you think that still would be too far to go into saying that they would have?
I don't know if staff has a different opinion. I just feel like us trying to oversee or determine whether conditions were met when we're asking 2 other parties to have discussions, it just gets too complicated.
No, I think that's the position we're stuck in, is that I'm hearing that it'll take 2 years for negotiations. Staff, how did you guys reconcile the concerns about how long it'll take for them to go through all those other licensing processes to find another location?
So I think it's similar to what I answered earlier, is that while it may take all or more than 2 years, there is a procedure for an extension of time and that it would be best deemed appropriate by the city of Aurora whether or not an extension is warranted based on the status of the new site at that time and the progress made towards getting those permits. So we just felt that it was a good way to cleanly pass this to the jurisdiction that will now have land use authority, that they will then be able to receive the best, most frequent and accurate updates about the status of the Aurora Highlands project, as well as the site selection for a new location for this facility.
Commissioner Henry.
So the city of Aurora had commented that they would like us to do a 2-year, am I right?
The city of Aurora asked us to deny the application
To
completely.
deny it, so 2 years is actually more than what the city of Aurora had asked us to do. Okay, and so then also the applicant did miss a planning meeting in June, am I correct?
Correct, so we had first heard this on June 14th, and it was continued to July 12th, and that was the meeting the applicant was unable to attend.
Because the applicant didn't seem to feel that it was urgent at that time, I see. All right, thank you.
Okay, there is a motion on the table. Is there a second?
No, the motion failed.
No.
There's a motion on the
Point of
table.
order, I made a motion and it hasn't, I made a motion for 5 years. That motion failed, the first motion failed.
Right.
And then Steve asked to make some questions, and so I guess if there's a second, then we can vote on that.
Right. Is there a second? Seeing none, that motion dies for lack of a second. So,
What's the motion?
you mean what's the motion?
You gotta do something. There's two motions that have been made.
Both have failed. So, can I do it having voted on the prevailing side? Can we reconsider the first motion? Yeah. Okay. Having voted on the prevailing side, I move that we reconsider the original motion, which was for 2020. Looking for a second.
Second.
Discussion?
No, I guess I'm concerned that, I'm hearing it's gonna take 2 years to negotiate, it'll take 2 years to get things done. I'd feel more comfortable with 3 years to give people time to get settled and then to begin the negotiations. But, I mean, honestly, I'm kinda, dividing the baby, but I mean, my concern is that I'm hearing that we need to get this in front of Aurora, and my also concern is that we need to make sure the services continue. So,
So you make a motion.
Well, I've got one on the table now.
would the chair,
Reconsider, which is your priority. You have to vote on that.
okay,
So the motion is to reconsider the original motion.
And
It has been seconded.
Commissioner Hodge,
Aye.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Dorisio,
no,
Commissioner Hanson,
No,
Commissioner Tedesco.
yes.
Okay. Now, let me explain why I'm willing to do this. I think if Aurora actually has a procedure in, and it's likely that they will grant conditional use, it seems reasonable to me. I can't say that Aurora will give them more time, but let's have faith. Okay. We are reconsidering. Do I need a motion on that?
No, we already did. It passed.
Well, the reconsideration
That was a
passed.
motion to reconsider, not,
we move to reconsider, and then we have to have a vote. I don't think you can have any discussion on this
okay.
vote.
Okay. Do we need another motion?
No, you don't.
Okay,
You just-
so
you
we're-
just need to re-vote on that.
We're back on, okay.
so just to clarify for the record, this will be a vote as to the initial motion made by Commissioner Tedesco to approve this application with an expiration date of July 31, 2020.
That's correct.
Correct.
Commissioner Tedesco,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Dorisio,
No.
Commissioner Hanson,
No.
Commissioner Hodge.
Aye. Okay, moving right along. We are ready for the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan.
Much easier.
I hope.
We really hope you're easier.
Me too. Good morning,
Okay,
Commissioners.
Shannon, you're up.
Okay, so this is the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan. It's PLN 2018-00015. And hopefully the mouse will work. Okay. So the purpose of the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan was to look at improving recreation and habitat along the Clear Creek Corridor, to engage in a public prioritization process. We know we have some really vocal neighborhoods along the corridor, and trying to understand what goes first, what goes second, and where all those improvements go needed to be something that happened in the public eye. And then also to try to garner more partnerships in this area so that we can really truly realize a public vision. So the Clear Creek Corridor is located in the southwest corner of Adams County. It runs from Sheridan to the confluence with the South Platte River around, I don't know, or Colorado Boulevard-ish. And it's in an area that has a wide mix of land uses right now and zonings right now. So there's industrial, there's residential, there's PUDs, there's some commercial, heavily developed area. In terms of future land use, it's a mixed-use corridor, so you can see a lot of purple along the corridor, and also some industrial and some residential. For the public outreach portion of this plan, we did 4 separate public meetings. We had a total of 164 attendees. And we also did 2 public surveys that were online so that folks who couldn't come to the meetings could participate in the same manner. And with the surveys, we had 621 respondents. So when I look at the list of all of the people that interacted with us, some people, were at every single outreach and did both surveys, and then other people only hit us for one piece of information. But we had over 200 individual contacts in this process. So I thought that was pretty successful in a time where it's hard to get people to come out to public meetings. And what we heard from all of those people were that we really need to focus on basic needs along the corridor. So being able to enhance safety by including patrols, improving lighting along the corridor, adding signage that tells people how to get where they're going or where they are, and then also improving access to the corridor. So that could be additional parking lots, it could be additional connections or regional connections, it could be safer crossings of roads, or providing a bike share so that folks have the ability to ride a bike if they don't have one. And we also heard that folks would like to see more restrooms along the corridor. So these were all it was really good feedback for us to hear. We also heard from everyone that circulation and access is an issue, not along the corridor because it's one long continuous corridor, but getting from neighborhoods to the Clear Creek Trail. So improving connections along major roads was a heavy focus, and then also providing better crossings so that folks can cross roads at grade instead of, a lot of times our underpasses flood, so it prevents a barrier to access. So just having sort of a dual ability for people to access the trails. We also heard that people would like to see more frequent parking areas. So we have a few now that are scattered along the corridor, but if we could improve that by providing a lot of smaller, more numerous parking areas, they would appreciate that. And then we also talked to everyone about recreation and what types of recreation opportunities they'd like to see for the future. Right now, it's a pretty bare bones trail corridor with a couple of parks located along it and a couple of open spaces. But there's an ability for us to really enhance the recreation opportunities here. So what we saw along the corridor is that different reaches definitely have a different character. And so that's kind of what these colored boxes represent, is some areas are more natural and would do well to remain that way. Other areas are more ripe for something a bit more intensive. So there's a menu of options in each of those boxes as to future improvements that we could incorporate. And we also learned about water quality in this process. So as you might know, most of the streams in the Denver metro area are impaired. in some way, usually from E. coli, which means that it's not necessarily safe to get in the water. I mean, you definitely shouldn't drink it without any sort of filtration. But there are also a lot of opportunities in the metro area for folks to get to those water sources and recreate in them. Right now, Clear Creek is not one of those. I mean, we don't have developed access points. We do certainly have gold panners that take advantage of the creek, and probably fishermen as well. But what we realized was that there is actually a lot of data available to us, and E. coli is the #1 concern in terms of recreation in the corridor. And so all of the recommendations that you'll see in the plan sort of speak to that in terms of improving stormwater as it comes into the creek and improving water quality along the entire creek. So this is a comprehensive plan amendment, and with that, there are several recommendations for development standards incorporated into the plan. One of the biggest ones is softening the edges along the corridor. So it's kind of a dark picture on the left, but right now you see a pretty typical view that you would see if you were on the trail. There's vegetation on one side, the trail, and then a wood fence that gets graffitied often. So the suggestion is to incorporate more vegetation and not a solid screen fence, but definitely a security fence. And that would create a more natural area. It would also take away some canvases for graffiti artists. And that vegetation has a dual purpose of beautifying the corridor, but also filtering stormwater and improving water quality. Another development standard is to try to focus activity along the creek. So as our rail stations come online and we see some redevelopment that we're expecting along the corridor, trying to encourage developers to take advantage of the creek as an asset and an amenity. So getting folks to incorporate patio space, whether it's for retail or restaurant facilities, or even multifamily. You know, there's sort of a transition from public space to semi-private to private in those facilities as well. So just trying to get folks to focus on the creek instead of what we see on the left right now is a real example of what you see as you ride the creek, just the backside of a business. Also, another recommendation, and this speaks more to the stormwater or water quality and ecology side of things, which we were surprised that many people were concerned about, but maintaining a 200-foot setback from the floodway, with that setback being a vegetated buffer. So that would ensure that wildlife can remain along the corridor, that they have food sources, and that we get additional filtration for water as it comes into the creek. So this is just a recommendation at this point. It's something we'd have to really study in detail to see how it's going to impact all of the properties along the corridor. And then another one that kind of goes along with that is putting outfalls outside of the 5-year floodplain and making that a standard that everyone has to meet. That would ensure that there is better water quality going into the creek. And then encouraging developers to create integrated stormwater parks that serve as an amenity, a beautification of the corridor, but also clean the water. And that has a possibility in some places to be shared among public and private land. So where Adams County owns land along the corridor, it's possible for us to grant an easement that would allow the developer to put those facilities off-site. In terms of implementation strategy, we have all of the recommendations laid out in a table in the back of the plan. And essentially, we'd be addressing basic needs first. So all of those things I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, safety patrols, lighting, signage, things like that. And then after those are done, or perhaps at the same time, if we have active partners that are ready to move forward with a project, we would work on those next. So there are some projects that are in that category right now that are progressing forward. And then at the same time, we'd also be looking at implementing development standards. So some of the big ideas that you see, like the colored boxes and creating huge recreation areas, unless we have strong partners partners with us, those would happen later. But the development standards are something we should probably jump on right now before all of the development that we think we're going to see along this corridor comes. So our referral process, we had referrals that were sent out to over 200 interested parties on May 14th. And the public comment period was from May 14th to June 4th. So we received one comment from a member of the public, Dan Fries, and he was complimentary and indicated that the plan shows promise for improving the corridor. And he indicated interest for gold panning activities to continue, which the plan has no recommendations that would prevent gold panning from continuing. And then we also heard from Tri-County Health Department. So they had some concerns related to water quality for recreation, also limiting tobacco use on trails and in the parks, providing additional shade along the corridor, and then addressing some typographical errors. So we have definitely addressed the errors. Water quality for recreation, they kind of had two comments for us. One was take that option out of the plan, and the other was proceed with caution, kind of. So my feeling on that is that we should leave it in the plan. It gives us something to strive for, right? It gives us a reason to improve water quality. If we have folks and we know folks want to be in the water, let's make it safe for them, and let's have a reason to do that. And then, so some of the other things, the tobacco use and shade, of course we'll address shade as we have specific projects come up. Tobacco use might be something that we could do once we have a ranger patrol, if that happens. But for now, it would be very hard for us to enforce that provision. We also heard from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So they had concerns related to noxious weeds, protecting aquatic invasive, or protecting the creek from aquatic invasive species, protecting wildlife habitat, the timing of construction activities for nesting animals, and then establishing dog-free zones to protect wildlife. So all of their concerns were more related to a construction project, which this is not, but there's certainly things that we could take into advisement as we have construction projects along the creek. So the Planning Commission heard this case on July 12th, 2018, and they voted 7-0 to adopt the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan with 3 findings of fact and 1 condition. That condition was up until August 31st, 2018, the Parks and Open Space Department staff may make minor corrections to the Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan, including but not limited to typographical errors to ensure consistency and accuracy throughout the plan. And I think that is it. Yep. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Tedesco.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is was urban drainage part of the agencies that were involved, and how well does this mesh with what they're asking for, specifically related to like the outfalls?
They were involved. We had a specific meeting with urban drainage. They didn't really have a lot of feedback for us. So we incorporated all of their data in terms of master planning features, and aren't suggesting anything contrary to their plans. And so I think for them, we're kind of fluff, if that makes sense. We're,
Right.
Extra stuff that they don't necessarily think about, but would be happy to participate in.
My only concern in asking that question is we're always looking for partners and funding when we do these projects, and if we have a plan that isn't in line with their plan, it could limit our ability to receive that funding. That's why I wanted to make sure we were all coordinating the same and had the kind of the same visual outlook. Maybe not in certain areas, but in that specific area.
Correct. Well, and they were one of our referral agencies, so they did not comment negatively, which we take as a favorable response.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Odericio.
I want to go a step further and just recommending that we keep them very close, more than a referral agency, because that's where the big dollars for a lot of these projects are going to come from. Truly is where you have the drainage issues, whether it's the state or the federal or the regional drainage is where I think we're going to find a lot more opportunities for more dollars to be invested in the river. So I appreciate that comment from the commissioner, and also encourage us to work very closely with those agencies. Thank you. And for overall, I think this is a good plan. I think that it shows a commitment on behalf of the county commissioner's staff and the community to make some improvements to these corridors. And I look forward to seeing us take these rivers and trails and moving them beyond just the nature and the recreation that we clearly talk about and see, but also into opportunities for economic development and even commuting alternatives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this? Seeing none, is there a motion? Commissioner Tedesco.
Madam Chair, I move that PLN 2018-00015 Clear Creek Corridor Master Plan be approved with 3 findings of fact and 1 condition.
Second.
Commissioner Tedesco?
Yes.
Commissioner Odericio?
Yes.
Commissioner Henry?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson? Commissioner Hodge?
Aye. Seeing no further business before the commission, we are adjourned.